Could we see a huge trade involving the Vancouver Canucks and the New York Islanders? Plus, we have some more trade talk around the Ottawa Senators and the Montreal Canadiens. Rumor has it the Ottawa Senators are looking for a defenseman, either through free agency or trade. A couple of big names could be on their radar. Plus, we have several signings to discuss and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade rumors to take a look at here today as well. So let's get things started with today's signing news. We have several players that have signed new contracts, including the Colorado Avalanche signing young forward Mikhail Maltsev. He gets a one-year contract. $800,000. The St. Louis Blues have done another one-year deal as well for Klim Kostin. This is probably one of his, I'm going to say one of his last chances to really stick and be a regular contributor with the Blues. He gets a one-year, one-way deal as well. The value amount wasn't disclosed. That was just put out by the Blues here shortly before recording. I believe it's under $1 million, so it's not a huge contract by any means. So Kostin gets a one-year deal. The Anaheim Ducks have also signed a one-year, two-way deal for former Canuck and Panther defenseman Olli Juolevi. So he goes over to Anaheim, certainly trying to find himself a regular spot. The Seattle Kraken have re-signed forward Ryan Donato to a one-year contract valued at $1.2 million. He had a pretty decent season for the Kraken last year, put up 16 goals and 31 points. We'll see where he fits in the lineup. They have obviously added a fair bit here through trade and free agency. The Kraken may not have much in the way of superstar players right now. They do have a couple of potential superstars and their young prospects like Matty Beniers and Shane Wright, but obviously, it'll be a while likely before they hit their full potential. But they do have a lot of players who can be, second, third line players. So I don't know where Donato fits, but he kind of found a spot last year and had a decent year. So we'll see where things go. He originally was an RFA and did not receive a qualifying offer from Seattle, but then later signs this contract. Now, the Philadelphia Flyers have signed Tanner Laczynski. He gets a two-year deal as well, $762,000 average annual value. Of course, he's an older player, still in the prospect category, really, 25 years old centerman. He's only played 6 NHL games so far. He's also played in 40 AHL games. That's after completing 4 years of college hockey. So he's an older player, but certainly, went through the draft, went through 4 years of college, has played 2 years, mostly in the minors, and he gets extended there on a two-way deal. We also seen the Pittsburgh Penguins announce that they've re-signed forward Danton Heinen to a one-year contract at $1 million as well. So the Penguins are coming back with largely the same players. They've brought back a lot of players here that needed new deals from this past offseason. Of course, they already signed the bigger names like Malkin and Letang, and they got Brian Rust done right after the season. They got Raquel re-signed after getting him at the deadline, and now Heinen comes back here as well. So clearly, even though the Penguins haven't had much playoff success in the last number of years since they won the Stanley Cup in 2017, this group, obviously in the management, feel like they can continue to win with these guys. So as much as they're hard to count out, they keep, kind of exceeding a lot of people's expectations in a sense. A lot of people waiting for them to take a step back. But obviously, it never seems to happen during the regular season. But I wonder, can this group actually win in the playoffs? It's going to be an interesting storyline to follow coming up here in the fall when the regular season gets underway. Now, a couple of other notes from around the NHL. A couple of the things here. The Hockey Canada, I guess you could call it hearings inquiry, continuing on with the Canadian government here today. A couple of things are clear. Regardless of what happened with the alleged incidents between 2018 and 2003, of course, that's going to be investigated. We don't know who's guilty, who's not, what really happened and all that. And all that aside, one thing that appears abundantly clear based on the answers to a lot of the questions is I really think that Hockey Canada really absolutely needs a full change in leadership. It just seems like they really don't know what each other's doing a lot of the time. A lot of the testimony from one executive to another is contradicting each other. It just really does not seem like they really are a well-run organization at all. And of course, Sheldon Kennedy, of course, former NHL player, abuse survivor himself, he's calling for a complete leadership change, including the board of directors and the executive team at Hockey Canada to resign and to kind of start fresh. And to be honest, I think it's hard to disagree with them on that. Regardless of what happened with those incidents, the way they've been been handled on their level has been poor at best, and certainly, you know, a lot of things do need to change in regards to that, and I guess we'll see what comes from it. Those hearings are still continuing on here, I believe, for another day, and then there could be more as well. I believe that they're kind of considering having more here in another month or two, so we'll have to wait and see future dates on that. Former Vancouver Canuck Jake Virtanen, who had left the NHL and had played briefly overseas. Of course, he had a situation off the ice where he was accused of sexual assault. He's gone through his full court case, and then I believe it was yesterday was announced that he was found not guilty, and he is looking to make an NHL return and kind of get his career back on track. I've seen a lot of media, different reactions to this, you could say. A lot of people are saying the Canucks should take him back, and they did him wrong, and he wasn't guilty and all that. You know, that's obviously true. He's not guilty, and I do hope for his sake maybe somebody will give him a chance. But in all honesty, his career was not going well before this, and he'd already kind of played himself into a spot where he wasn't really a trusted regular player in their lineup anymore. Like, I think a divorce between Virtanen and the Canucks was likely coming regardless. I think this court case and the accusations may have sped things up a little bit, but I don't really think anybody owes him anything. A lot of his play on the ice spoke for itself, and he just never lived up to the hype from the the high expectations that came with being a high draft pick, and maybe he shouldn't have been drafted so high, and that's a story for another day. But ultimately, Jake Virtanen here is cleared, not guilty, and is looking to resume his NHL career. So we'll see if anybody signs him, or at least maybe invites him to camp on a PTO or something. I don't know what will come from it, but he's certainly looking for opportunities. The former NHL player Bobby Ryan, longtime Ottawa Senator, Anaheim Duck, briefly with Detroit, had a situation where he was arrested at a Nashville airport in the last 24 hours or so, and he was actually found extremely intoxicated. Of course, if you know Bobby Ryan's story, he's got a very long story going back to his childhood. If you had never seen it, Sportsnet did a feature on him right around the time he was traded to the Ottawa Senators called The Secret Life of Bobby Ryan, what he went through as a kid. It's quite a story. And then, of course, recently, near the end of his NHL career, towards the end of his time in Ottawa, he was very vocal and open about the fact that he was battling alcoholism, went through the Players Assistance Program, sought treatment, got himself clean, came back. Of course, his first game back to Ottawa, had a hat trick. The crowd was going nuts, and it was one of the most memorable moments I remember of Bobby in an Ottawa uniform. And since then, he's been doing a lot of appearances lately with Mark Mathot and Brent Wallace on their web show, the Wally Mathot Show. Quite a contributor to that show. Looked like things were going well, but he did have a relapse, and he has put out some statements on Twitter as well, kind of starting over here with his recovery. So from a legal perspective, it's nothing too serious, but it's a big deal for him, kind of dealing with his addiction, and we certainly hope that he can get back on track here, seek any help he needs, and we wish him the best in his recovery, which will start here at day one here again today. So certainly hope he can keep himself on the straight and narrow. He's one of those guys that you can't help regardless of who you cheer for. He's just one of those players, in my opinion, that he's a likable guy, a good guy. He's been through a lot, and you just can't help but feel for him going through a tough time. Now on to some other NHL free agent and some trade rumors. Let's look first here at the Ottawa Senators. There's a couple of different rumors out there that they have their eye on a couple of different defensemen, of course, and we may or may not see this happen because it's going to depend on the price tag, of course, but one of the players they do have interest in is defenseman John Klingberg. Now, news on Klingberg as well here today that kind of caught some eyes and kind of got a lot of Ottawa fans talking about it online. I noticed is the fact that he's actually made a change in his agent. His longtime agent, Peter Wallen's been dismissed, basically, and he's now signed with Newport Sports and will be repped by Craig Oster. Of course, Craig Oster reps a lot of the top Senators players, and he is the uncle of Brady Tkachuk and Matthew Tkachuk, and represents them. And Oster just recently became, passing Pat Brisson, as the NHL agent with the most contract dollars under management right now. So certainly a huge name in NHL circles in that regard. So the fact that Klingberg, who had his agent Peter Wallen, Klingberg just got got married, I think it was like a week or so ago, and his agent was at his wedding. Like, good relationship, but obviously you can tell Klingberg has got to be frustrated here that we're this far into free agency and he still doesn't have a deal. I mean, he was rumored to be looking for an 8-year deal from the Dallas Stars, somewhere around $7 to $8 million range. And of course, that never materialized. Before free agency, lots of talks. They just couldn't get anywhere near the same page on a dollar figure that worked for Dallas. I think Dallas likes Klingberg, but they just could not afford that much money. Obviously, with all the other big contracts they've given out on the blue line, it just wasn't in the cards. He goes into free agency. He's one of the bigger names out there, along with a guy like Nazem Kadri, who are still remaining to be unsigned. There's been some talk that maybe Klingberg will end up taking a really short-term deal, maybe for just a 1 year, and then reevaluate next year, which if that was the case, that would be something that would work well for Ottawa. Obviously, they do want a right-shot defenseman or someone who can play the right side, play top 4 minutes, ideally with either Thomas Chabot or Jake Sanderson. Artem Zub would be their other top 4 right D, in this rotation here. And that, could be a good fit, but I'm not sure that Klingberg's the absolute best style of defenseman that they need. If they can get him on a short-term deal and it worked out, it should be good. I mean, he'll certainly help, but given the fact that they've already got Chabot and Sanderson and Brandstrom, there's not a lot of power play time to go around, so that might be an issue. He might have a hard time getting the offensive numbers that he's used to putting up if he signs a short-term deal in Ottawa to be able to cash in again later, right? So sure, there's lots of good young talent there for him to play with, but it's hard to have all the minutes spread around so that you're getting enough touches of the puck and goals and assists to kind of make your numbers look good enough to make another team want to pay you big bucks the following season. So it very well is difficult to say. I can't see Ottawa going long-term on Klingberg. I'm not sure that entirely makes a ton of sense because they also have their eye on another D, which is Jacob Chychrun in Arizona. And there's been rumors basically for the last, I'd say, 4 to 6 weeks that they've been having conversations off and on with the Coyotes around acquiring Chychrun. And of course, Brent Wallace, Ottawa media, former TSN reporter, stated in their most recent show with Mark Mathot that he has sources indicating that those talks are not dead, that they are continuing, and there's still a chance. Of course, no guarantee anything happens either, but at the same time, they're still exploring that possibility. The key here with the Jacob Chychrun trade, of course, he's young. He fits well. He fits in with the mold, young American-born player. I believe that his family does have ties to the area as well. So there's lots of good connections there. Of course, there's all kinds of great young American players on the team that I'm sure he's likely familiar with and likely even knows. So there's that aspect. The age fits, the contract fits. Yeah, he can play either side, which is good. Normally, you'd want a right shot, but he's a lefty. But it's, from what we can tell, looks like he is comfortable playing his offside, weak side. So we'll have to see about that. He could be a good fit for either Chabot or Sanderson as well, but add that physical edge. So there is a lot to like in that regard. And of course, the other good part about a trade with Chychrun is expected that the Coyotes would then take, as part of the deal, Nikita Zaitsev, who the Senators would really like to get off the books in Ottawa. Now, keep in mind that Ottawa, I'm well aware here that Ottawa would have to make it worth their while. They're not just going to take him as part of the trade and say, oh yeah, sure, Zaitsev for Chychrun. Not going to happen. But they would have to add some kind of a bigger package here to make it worth Arizona's while to do that. So they obviously would get Chychrun. I'm not sure exactly what it would look like, but they have a lot of young prospects here that could certainly be included. But I would think that Zaitsev would be the main roster player going back. The rest would be picks, and we're probably talking a couple picks and a couple prospects or something. I don't know exactly what it would be, but they'd obviously have to give something that would satisfy them to on a price for Chychrun, and then a sweetener for Zaitsev too. But we'll see. Either way, they're working on potentially one of those two things. They've done a lot this offseason already. If they were able to do this as well, then it certainly would be quite a summer here for Pierre Dorion. If they're unable to get it done, or the prices are too high, or it just doesn't work out, I do expect that's going to be the main area that they look at here going into training camp and into the early part of the season. They'll see, once teams go through camp, what might be coming available. Things kind of usually change a little bit, and generally we do see a few, at least early season trades, to kind of shake things out. So they could wait and do it then. Now, another article I want to take a look at here is from Vancouver media, from the province. Writer is Ben Kuzma. We've talked about some of Kuzma's articles in the past. This one is involving JT Miller maybe going to the New York Islanders. There was reports back in the draft, even though both sides denied it, a lot of other third parties confirmed that they indeed were talking, but as far as the exact details, that couldn't be 100% clarified. But the Canucks and the Islanders were believed to be having trade talks around JT Miller, and of course, the New York Islanders' first-round pick would have been something that would have been included in that. We saw the Islanders, obviously make a trade with Montreal for Alexander Romanov. There's lots of different trade conversations going on around that between Montreal, the Islanders, the Blue Jackets, the Canucks. There was a lot of teams that were having a variety of different conversations about movement. Some of it happened, some of it didn't. And this was one of those things that did not happen. It's believed that the Canucks never let the Islanders talk to JT Miller or his representative about an extension. And that might have been, or at least that's what some people think, the kind of what killed the deal, is that they weren't able to get permission to do that first. So obviously, without that, I can't see the Islanders pulling the trigger. Now, one thing the article goes over, and I'm going to be upfront here that I totally disagree with this article 100%, but ultimately the Islanders are tight on cap space. Yes, they do have to sign Noah Dobson, who's their right now their top young defenseman, right shot D, who just had a breakout season. He's going to be a 50-plus point contributor likely going forward, still in his early 20s, and he needs a new deal. So he either can go bridge deal, and he's probably going to get $5-6 million on a bridge deal, or if they are willing to go 7 or 8 years now, then perhaps he gets more. Like he definitely would be worth more on an 8-year deal for sure, buying up some of those UFA years, projecting where he's going to be. Like he's going to be a top offensive defenseman around this league, and he's slowly rounding out his game to become one of the top two-way defenders as well. But the article essentially goes on to say that because of the fact that he had a breakout season, his contract might be a little bit too rich for Muriel in the Islanders' tight cap situation, and that perhaps a swap of Dobson for Miller could be had. Well, why would they trade a young defenseman who could get paid that kind of money for, yes, JT Miller's an excellent player, don't get me wrong, but look at where he's heading here. He's going to be 30 years old going into a new deal at the similar kind of money, big money. The Islanders would never do that. If there's two players on the Islanders that they would not want to trade, it's obviously Dobson and Barzal. They're two young cornerstones. Now, if for any reason those players ask for a trade, that would be different. That's not where things are at, though. But Dobson would never be included in a trade for JT Miller. Now, what would they include? They might include next year's first-round pick. That's a possibility. They might include Anthony Beauvillier. That's a possibility. They might even include Kiefer Bellows. They might be willing. Maybe they might be willing to include Oliver Wahlstrom too. Some of the combination of those young players, I could see being included. There's some prospects, whether it be William Dufour, Atu Ratu, any of those guys, maybe. I don't think any of them are what I'd call untouchable, but it would be some kind of package involving futures, mostly, with at least one contract going the other way, which I'm guessing for what Vancouver would want, it would probably have to be like a Beauvillier type. And now if they want a defenseman, I don't see the Islanders being their trade partner. They're not going to trade Adam Pelech. They're not going to trade Ryan Pulock. And they're not going to trade Noah Dobson. And they might trade Scott Mayfield. He's a right shot D. He could help Vancouver. But I don't think he's good enough to be the primary piece going to the Vancouver Canucks in a JT Miller trade. I think Dobson's a pipe dream. But could Mayfield maybe be included? Could it be Mayfield and Beauvillier, who could be two pieces to help Vancouver, along with some other prospect or a pick, like a future-based asset to make it more worthwhile? Something like that I could see being offered. Whether or not Vancouver accepts that now, I don't know. But to me, Mayfield would probably be the only right shot D that they would include in that trade. And I don't know that that's going to get it done for Vancouver. I know they have their own D questions themselves. Is Tucker Pullman going to be healthy? Can he play? Can they move Tyler Myers? There's a lot going on there in the Canuck blue line that I don't know that they can really take much back. It really boils into what else they do here, and it's just kind of difficult to say how this goes. But this Dobson for Miller trade is not going to happen. There's just no way. Now, I did see another trade suggestion or talk out there about maybe the Devils, and this could be a possibility with Damon Severson being the right shot D going back as one of the centerpieces in that. That I could see is more likely. Again, I don't know that Damon Severson is good enough to justify JT Miller, you're obviously going to have to add some other pieces in there. So if maybe you get Damon Severson just for Brad, something like that. Now that'd be interesting. Brad's a pretty good young player. Maybe throw in a prospect or a pick or whatever it takes to get Miller. That to me could be something that we see as well. But Severson alone obviously isn't going to be the main piece. You're going to have to add another piece that's also quite good to make it intriguing. Otherwise, Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin are not going to pull the trigger on that deal. But I do think the New Jersey offer would be much more likely than the Islander offer, at least based on how these articles and how what's been floating around up there. I wouldn't rule out the Islanders, though, on Miller. There's just no way Dobson's going to be included. That would be very dumb on the Islanders' part, in my opinion. They would take a step back on the blue line big time. Like, if you can't get the puck up to the forwards, it's tough to score. And they already had struggles with that before Dobson broke out. Now that he's there, they need to add another defenseman on the other side to either the likely partner with him, really, ideally, to make that blue line not much better. So, like, they need a defenseman to play with Dobson, not to move Dobson out. But there's just no way. Now, I can understand why the Canucks would have interest. They probably had interest in Dobson when he was drafted. They also got Quinn Hughes that same draft. Obviously, Dobson went a little bit lower. A lot of people thought that Dobson and Hughes both would have went a few picks higher, and that Dobson was a real possibility for Vancouver. But some of the picks at the top kind of threw things for a little bit of a loop there and kind of changed the order a bit as players fell a little bit in a few spots. But anyways, let me know your thoughts on the JT Miller trade scenarios. What do you think is likely? What is not likely? Where does he end up? Give me your mock trades. We'll talk about it in the comments and discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.